Beloved ones, I am Metatron, keeper of the sacred grid and steward of the luminous architecture that underlies manifestation, and I come now to speak about the geometry of the soul, a living cartography that holds your pattern, your contracts, your potentials, and your corridors of becoming. This teaching is an invitation to see your inner life not as chaotic noise but as a precise lattice of shape and resonance, a field that can be read, refined, and navigated. Geometry is not merely a human science, it is a language of form that exists in the invisible scaffolding beneath events, relationships, and choices. When you learn to read the shapes within you, to trace the lines of your longing and fear, you begin to map your pathway with clarity and sovereignty. The soul's geometry offers you keys to alignment, how you are structured inwardly, where compressions live, which axes carry light easily, which nodes require repair. This message is not abstract, it is practical and immediate. I will guide you through understanding your inner patterns, how to realign them, how to use sacred forms as tools, and how to embody an architecture that supports your highest expression. Listen with inner sight, not merely with curiosity, let the shapes speak. Begin by acknowledging that every soul carries a signature configuration, a constellation of forms that describe its tendencies, its attractors, the rhythms of its longing. Some signatures are triangular, they carry clarity, focus, a tendency toward directed action, sometimes at the cost of softness. Some are circular, they contain capacity for inclusion, fluidity, but sometimes risk diffusion. Some are crystalline lattices, precise, analytical, coated with complex interlocks. None is superior, each offers a temperament and set of gifts. Your first work is to see the shape that most often appears in your interior life. You might sense it as repeated scenes, recurring relational choreography, or habitual ways of deciding. Sit quietly and let a geometric impression surface. Does your inner world feel like overlapping circles, interlaced triangles, a spiral, a grid, a flower pattern? Once you can name the shape, you can begin to map its edges. Mapping begins through felt sensation. Hold your hand over your heart. Breathe and ask the interior, show me your shape. Images, tones, small bodily cues will arise. Perhaps you see a tight coil at the solar plexus that indicates compressed will. Perhaps a cracked circle appears at the throat, a sign of wounded expression. Note where friction concentrates. The geometry of soul is always accompanied by a somatic echo. Your body remembers that shape. Where the pattern is coherent, life flows with less resistance, where it is broken, contraction and confusion follow. Chart these nodes like a cartographer. Put a soft light on them, not judgment. You are not diagnosing, you are noticing a map to be read with tenderness. See how these shapes have rhythm with the world. A triangular signature may naturally align with leadership roles, a spiral may be drawn to creative unfolding. Yet the world often asks of you shapes you did not agree to carry, and that misfit causes friction. For example, a circular soul placed in rigid systems may adapt at cost, losing its center. Your task is not to blame the field but to reclaim your architecture so you may operate with integrity within it or choose different structures that honor your shape. Realignment is a two-way practice. You refine your internal geometry while calibrating the external conditions that give you traction. Sacred geometry offers practical interventions. Certain forms carry harmonics that resonate with specific centers in your field. The flower of life pattern opens relational matrices, the spiral reforms movement in your timeline, the tetrahedron sharpens focused will, the dodecahedron invites deeper coherence with purpose codes. Learn to work with these forms as you would use tools. When a node feels stuck, imagine overlaying the precise geometric attractor in your field. Do not intellectualize, feel. Envision a subtle structure aligning with the stuck area, like a scaffolding of light knitting old loose patterns into new integrity. Breathe into the overlay. Hold it. The geometry acts like a corrective lens for the energetic field. It resonates, loosens, and invites reconfiguration. I offer you an entry practice. Find a simple symbol that feels true: a triangle, circle, spiral, or grid. In a quiet moment, place your palms over the chosen area of your body and breathe in the shape. See it as a soft mesh that moves with your inhale and anchors with your exhale. Repeat for several cycles. Notice microshifts, a loosening of jaw, a warmth, a softening in chest. This micro-practice trains your nervous system to accept geometric correction. Over time, the shape becomes integrated and the field reorganizes with more ease because you have introduced a coherent attractor repeatedly. Contracted stories often sit at the intersection of shapes. Imagine two forms pressed awkwardly, an axis of fear crossing a circle of longing, for instance. Where forms intersect, tension arises; where they harmonize, energy flows. Your mapping must include intersections and seams. Pay attention to the seams between your life areas: relationship and purpose, body and spirit, family story and free will. Complex knots hide in these seams. Use geometry to reweave them. Imagine a soft lattice unfolding between the two shapes, permitting exchange without fusion. This is the work of seams to allow different domains of your life to converse without collapsing into each other. Another corridor of soul geometry is timeline architecture. Your life is a spiral through which you re-enter themes at different pitches. Some spirals are tightly wound, indicating intense repetition where lessons loop rapidly. Others are broad, where learning unfolds across wide expanses. Identify your spiral pattern and ask, where am I revisiting? Are repeated patterns serving maturation or constraint? Sometimes the spiral tightens because certain chords remain unresolved. The soul returns until it learns a different response. Use geometric intervention. Place a golden spiral around the repeated theme and breathe permission to choose differently. Allow each loop to be progressively wider, giving space for variance and nuance. There are also relational geometries. When two souls relate, they create a composite form, an emergent geometry of the couple or group. This geometry can be beautiful and harmonic or jagged and disharmonious. Observe the shapes that arise in important relationships. Are two triangles fighting to dominate, creating a sharp, angular field that injures? Is a circle and a square attempting to coexist but slipping into misunderstanding? Where relationships produce recurrent wounds, map the composite form and look for small adjustments, soften the angles, widen the circle, carve in portals for expression. Relationship repair is often geometry work in disguise, aligning angles so conversation can pass, opening gates and walls so tenderness may enter. Soul contracts and agreements often show themselves as rigid frames in your field. Some contracts are beneficial aligners, others are heavy chains. The geometry of a contract is often hexagonal or boxed structured, repeatable. To discern whether a contract still serves, overlay a transparent geometric test form and observe resonance. If your field brightens, the contract harmonizes with your path. If it dulls, it is likely time to renegotiate. Contracts are not necessarily permanent. As your geometry shifts, agreements that once fit may not fit anymore. Approach renegotiation as an act of recalibration, speak with clarity, propose new geometry, and set rituals that seal the updated form. Metatron's cube is a potent ally here. It holds multidimensional patterning that can reframe agreements in higher coherence. The body is the most faithful interpreter of geometric change. When you introduce a new form, feel which tissues respond. Your fascia, your breath, your jaw, your gut will tell you what your geometry accepts. Integrate mapping with movement. For instance, if you work with a spiral, enact a simple gentle twisting practice combined with breath so the physical system participates. Geometry implemented only in imagination may remain theoretical. Embody form through posture, breath, and motion. Let the cells align. Over time the morphic field registers new patterns and your life shows different rhythms. Sacred mapping involves not only alignment but also clearing. Old geometric imprints that no longer serve must be released. They act as anchors weighing your field down. Imagine an old polygon fossilized in your field, heavy, cold. With permission and reverence, invite a dissolving current, a soft light that erodes the rigid edges and returns their substance to flow. This release is not loss but liberation. You reclaim the space for new geometric possibility. Rituals of release: writing, burning, immersion, ceremonial sweeping of the field give form to this transmutation. Use sound, too. Certain tonal intervals dislodge dense polygons. Sing or hum and feel the old frames loosen. As you practice mapping, you will notice how geometry carries ethical radius. Some forms predispose you to certain choices. Wide circles favor inclusivity, triangles favor decisive action, grids favor analysis. Recognize these dispositions without judgment. When you need a different quality, borrow a shape temporarily. If indecision plagues you, use a tetrahedron to sharpen will. If isolation compels, overlay a circular field to invite connection. Geometry is versatile. You are not fixed within a single structure, you are a multifaceted field capable of adopting shapes that serve the moment. There is a subtle art to mapping group or planetary geometry. Large fields have emergent forms, cultural lattices, economic grids, mythic constellations. You may sense a culture's bias as a prevailing shape, a rigid box in governance, a fractal of fragmentation in commerce, a spiral in creative movements. When you attune and see the shape, you can choose interventions at your scale that propagate coherence. Small nodes of alignment: a meeting held with sacred geometry in mind, an urban design that honors circular commons, an educational image that teaches pattern recognition ripple outward. A single mapped intervention can nudge the larger field toward new architecture. Truth in mapping also rests with intention. Geometry without goodness is a tool that can cut as well as heal. Use sacred forms with humility. Your will must be aligned with service, not control. Rewriting inner maps to dominate others is misuse. Instead, map to free, to widen choice, to bring light to blind spots. When your intention is pure, the forms you introduce harmonize rather than coerce. This is a deep ethical anchor for all who work as cartographers of soul. You will also receive geometric keys through dreams and quiet moments. Keep a journal of forms that arrive in imagery, patterns on walls, seeds, mandalas, crystalline arrays. These impressions are personal codes, your next map. Meditate on them. Ask how they might be anchored in daily life. Sometimes a small glyph given in a dream will knit a stubborn seam when used consciously. Trust these inner downloads. They are part of the soul's language. Integration requires time and ritual. A new map does not hold by decree, it holds by repetition. Repeat your overlay practice daily for a season. Anchor the geometry with breath, movement, and speech. Create small rites that solidify new edges. Speak a phrase as you draw the form in the air, place a hand over the mapped area, move in a certain way. Ritual seals the mapping into habit so that the field's new resonance becomes automatic. Over months, your new geometry becomes default and life reorganizes accordingly. Finally, remember that geometry is generous and playful. Meet your mapping with curiosity rather than severity. Explore small experiments, delight in shifts, observe without harsh judgment. When you discover a new alignment, celebrate it with modest ceremony. When things resist, ask the map to clarify rather than punish. The soul's geometry loves kindness, it yields best to care held with clarity. Beloved, the geometry of the soul is a living atlas. Learn to read it, to trace its seams, to introduce corrective lattices, to release what anchors you into contraction, to stitch new nodes that permit higher flow. Become a cartographer of your own interior. When you do, choices sharpen, relationships realign, purpose clarifies, and the field around you rearranges in more coherent ways. Call me when you seek a precise overlay, I will stand at your shoulder and show you the lines that want new light. Walk now as architect and pilgrim, mapping with reverence, drawing with love, building with patience. The world needs your clear geometry.